So let's go ahead. We've got our box and whisker plots. Again, you're going to have a box, which is your rectangle. It is going to have a dividing line in the middle somewhere. Not necessarily right in the middle, but often it's off to one side. And then you're going to have a whisker off to the left and a whisker off to the right. The box and whisker plot, if you look at main things, you kind of want to think about this middle part as like a number line. Okay? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 important points on that number line. Those 5 important points are called the 5-number summary. Okay? The 5-number summary includes your minimum, and at the other end, your maximum. In the middle, number 3, it contains your median, which is also known as quartile 2. However, it's more frequently called the median. And then there's something called quartile 1 and quartile 3. Make sense? What do you think of when you hear the word quartile?
Quarter.
Quarter. What do you think of when you hear the word quarter? 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections of our graph or of our plot. Okay? The 5 numbers divide all the data into 4 equal parts. Each contains 25% of the data. Okay? And I'm going to show you how to come up with those pretty easily. Hopefully minimum, maximum, and median, you're decent on. Finally, there's one little thing, and it's kind of squished in here, but it is important for you to know how to do. And that is to find the IQR, also known as the interquartile range. Sounds like some space thing, doesn't it? The interquartile range is Q3, or quartile 3, minus Q1. So if you look at my picture, quartile 3 is right here. Quartile 1 is right here. So the interquartile range is basically telling me how wide is your box. Okay? So, here is a set of data. It is already listed in order for me. That was very nice of them. So if I asked you what's the minimum, what would you say?
1.
If I asked you what's the maximum, what would you say? 25. If I asked you for Q2, which is also known as the
median,
what would you say?
5.
Okay. So 5 is our median, which means that this is below my median, correct? And this is above my median. Yes? Yes? No? Yes? Good answer. Okay. So if I ignore the 5, because the 5 is already a part of my list here, and I looked at just the 1 and the 2, what is the median of the left side? So if my list was only those 2 numbers, what's the median of that? 1.5. Guess what? That's Q1.
Say, oh, and then it's the median of the other one. 20.
Over here, what's the median? 15 plus 25 is 40, divided by 2 is 20. That's my quartile 3. Super easy to come up with the 5-number summary. Now, on your quiz, I believe you not only have to list the 1, 1.5, 5, 20, and 25, you also have to list their names. So you need to know it's called the minimum, Q1, Q2, Q3, max. Q2, I actually would prefer you write median, but I'm not going to mark you down either way. Out of curiosity, what is my IQR? How would I find that? I take Q3, which is 20, and I subtract Q1, which is, so my IQR is 18.5. Piece of cake, right? Okay, now there is a number line already set up for me here. Do you see this? So I am going to draw my box and whisker plot. The first thing I'm going to do, by the way, my box and whisker plot, I'm going to set just above the number line, just for ease. So if my minimum value is 1, I'm going to say 1 is about right here. I'm going to put a point, just a dot. And Q1 is 1.5, so that's going to be a point right next to it, isn't it? My median is 5, so I put another point there. Q3 is 20, and my maximum is 25. So there are my 5 dots. Do you see that? Which 3 are going to make up my box? The middle 3. So here's what I do. The middle 3, I draw vertical lines, and then I connect the tops of those lines and the bottoms of those lines. And then the last thing I do is I draw in my whiskers. Connect these 2 dots and those 2 dots. That's what my box and whisker plot looks like.
That's it.
That's it.
My work.
It's easy, isn't it? Now remember, we have how many sections to it? 4 sections. We have whisker, box, box, whisker. And each one of those contains 25% of the data. So what this shows me right here is that it looks to me like most of the data is down here. You just have 1 or 2 that are messing things up and making it stretch so far that way. So what percent of the data is between the minimum and Q3? Well, my minimum is right here, and Q3 is right there. So how many sections is that? That's a whisker, a box, and another whisker.
75.
So if each one of those is 25%, 3 of them would be 75%. What percent of the data is between 20 and 25?
25%.
Well, that's just a whisker, so that's 25%. Name 3 intervals that each contain 50% of the data. How many sections, boxes or whiskers, would 50% of the data be? 2. So I can say, okay, it's this whisker all the way to the median, right? That's that whisker in that box. It could be Q1 to Q3, because that's 2 boxes, right? Or it could be the median to the...
You have to name all of it.
It says name 3 intervals. So there's 1 interval, 2 intervals, 3 intervals. 1 is the left whisker and the left box. The next one is both boxes. The other one is the right box and the right whisker. Is that pretty easy?
Yeah.
Please tell me it is,
Yeah.
because that's about as hard as it gets.
For chilling.
Yes. Okay, so big thing to remember here is when I had the median and it was on my list, I have to take that median out of the picture when I'm finding the Q1 and Q3. Okay? All right, here's my data now. Is it in order?
No.
So the first thing I want to do is put it in order. So let's see, that would be 1 and then what? 3, 5, 5, 12, 12, 8, 12, 12, and then 14. And see, I'm going to go back and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because knowing me, I would have missed a number and it's going to screw everything up. All right, so let's see. My minimum is what? Let's do. What's my minimum? 1. Q1 I'll get to in a minute. Q2 I'll get to in a minute. Q3 I'll get to in a minute. And what's my max? 14. So you notice my number line looks a little different because I only need to get from 0 to 14. By the way, it could be from 1 to 14. I don't technically need 0 on there. So let's find Q2 because that's what? The median. So what is the median here? 14 and 1, 12 and 3, 12 and 5. It would be right here in the middle of 5 and 8, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So it's not on my list like this one was. What is halfway between 5 and 8? Well, if I don't know, take 5, add 8, and divide by 2. 6.5. So my Q2 is 6.5. Now, 6.5 is not on my list, correct? It's not actually a data point.
Yeah.
Unlike up here where it was. That means that there's nothing to cross out and not count when I'm finding my Q1 and Q3. So 6.5 falls right there. So all of these numbers are included when I'm looking for Q1. And all of these numbers are included when I'm looking for Q3. So let's see, what's my median here? It's going to be right between there.
4.
That would be 4. And over here, right between there, what's between 12 and 12? 12.
Oh, yeah.
So how do I find my IQR?
12 minus 4.
What does IQR stand for, by the way? Interquartile range. That's Q3 minus Q1. So that's 8. That means my box is going to be 8 units wide. So now, let's see. My minimum value is 1. Q1 is 4. Q2 is 6.5. Q3 is 12. And my max is 14. So again, through the middle 3 points, draw your vertical lines. Connect the tops. Connect the bottoms. And then draw in your whiskers. Notice that this one looks a little different than the one up above. Why does it look a little different? How does it look a little different?
It's more spread out.
It's more spread out. It seems like it's more evenly distributed, right? Because the whiskers are closer to being the same length.
Yeah.
As opposed to one being teeny tiny and the other one being super long. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Outliers. An outlier is any value that lies more than 1.5 times the length of the box from either end of the box. Huh? What is the length of the box? Isn't that your IQR?
Is it really?
Uh-huh. Because my IQR is Q3 minus Q1, it tells me the length of the box. So, in this example, an outlier is more than 1.5 times whatever my IQR is, which is 8. What is 1.5 times 8?
1.5 times 8 is...
I don't have my calculator. 1.5
12.
times 8 is 12. So, the way I determine if a number is an outlier is I look at where is this end of the box. This is at, what, 12? Yes? And I look at this end of the box, which is at, what, Q1 is 4. And anything that is more than 12 units past here or 12 units past here would be considered an outlier. So 12 units past here would be anything 24 or higher. This one would be anything 4 minus 12 would be what? Negative 8 or lower. Does that kind of make sense? Because if it's too far out there, it messes things up. So if I were to look here, and I looked at, what is Q1? Q1 is 1.5. Q3 is 20. And so to find my outlier info, I would take 1.5 and multiply it by the IQR, which is 18.5. Yes? 1.5 times 18.5, and that gives me 27.75. So 27.75 units past the 20, or on this side of the 1.5, would give me values that are considered outliers. When you have outliers, they are often graphed as just dots beyond the whiskers, because if you actually include them in the whiskers, you may end up with a graph that looks like this. And it's just absurd. Like, why have that? You get what I'm saying? So what you would have is you would have a regular box and whisker plot, something like this, and then you might have a point out there that would be representing an outlier. Okay? Why is it important to identify outliers?
Because it skews your data.
It's not
Because it skews your data. When we were talking about, you guys did better, I think, than my second period. My second period, we were talking about hours of TV watched yesterday. My second period had 1 and 2 hours for the most part, and then there was somebody who had 10. Well, if I include that 10 in my data, what does it do to my mean?
It screws
It
up.
pushes it up, doesn't it? What does it do to my median? It may push it up also. It pushes my maximum up. So it skews my data a bit. So since we call that basically a fluke, we say that's not typical, we're going to look at the main bulk of the data. And so that's how you calculate what would be considered a fluke, an outlier. Okay? All right. Happy studying.